All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking historic baseball here. Today is June 4th, 2024, fresh just about exactly 50 years ago today on Tuesday, June 4th, 1974, one of the great incidents in Major League Baseball happened. Yes, we are talking about the 10-cent beer night riots in Cleveland, Ohio for the Cleveland Indians versus the Texas Rangers. I'm joined by my co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Haps, look, we've all had a few beverages in our day, but we are talking about an entire stadium, an entire fan base, and almost an entire city that decided that enough wasn't enough and they were going to get their fill on 10-cent beer. It's just pretty fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what makes it special for tonight is joining us for the first time ever. My father was present at 10-cent beer night. He lived to tell the tale about it. We're going to talk to him about what it was like being there at 10-cent beer night. So join us for the first time ever, as we refer to him as Dave. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much. And I just want to make sure that you know it was right about at this exact time that we're recording that things started going haywire.
And folks, also, before we should dive into this, the drinking age wasn't 21 at the time. Old Dave was only 20 years old, totally legal, and had a great time.
Yes.
You know, when we kind of look back on this situation, you know, this is actually a very historical week in world history. You know, you got Churchill giving a very impactful speech in 1940. The Battle of Midway was 82 years ago. Rome was liberated 80 years ago. Normandy invasion was 80 years ago. But we here are talking about 50 years ago in Cleveland, of all places, where 10-cent beer was a good idea.
Sure was.
Dave, first just start us off. Where did this idea come from? How did you all hear about it? And sort of what inspired that entire city just to flock down to the stadium and partake?
Well, at one point in time, they used to even have nickel beer night. And that had been done a couple of times before. And the old idea was, let's bring some of that back. And it went to 10-cent beer night. And as a point of reference, I think people ought to know is that the week before, at the end of May, Texas had their own 10-cent beer night. And it was old-fashioned baseball, hard-nosed, and the fact is that brushback pitches, that whole routine, somebody would slide in hard to second and take the second baseman out. Well, things got real chirpy in Texas. And the next thing I remember is watching on the TV is to see that the bullpens at the time were behind the center field fence. And right behind the bullpens, you would have the people in the bleacher seats. And usually those are the cheap seats, so it gave you a lot of extra beer money. And as things got chirpy as they going on, I can still remember fans leaning over, yelling at the Indians bullpen, and things just progressed worse, and out flew the beers. And things were flying all over the place. But the big thing that I can even remember was the fact is they started dumping beers on the Indians bullpen, and that did not go over well.
So the war really started in Texas.
That's
and
right.
And they decided, we're going to return the favor when y'all get to Cleveland a week later.
Absolutely right, Fresh. So what they actually have, that America seems to have this tit for tat attitude about things. And we had a radio announcer by the name of Pete Franklin, and he really did help set up the Cleveland fans for It's Time for Paybacks. And I used to listen to Pete Franklin, roughly started about 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock on local Cleveland Stadium. He was very opinionated, and we could tell that he had done his work because usually at that time, Cleveland was usually averaging probably somewhere between 7,000 to 10,000 people at Municipal Stadium. The place sat 80,000, and the wild thing was 25,000 plus show up for the game and the beer.
So as the game started, how did this sort of build and get out of control? You come and have a couple of beers, maybe $1, spread amongst a few buddies. But at what point did you sort of know that this is about to get out of control and we're in some serious trouble? And the game is now secondary to everything going on.
Well, usually you got figured out is somewhere around in, I think it was the third inning. And by that time, people became pretty well lubricated and the Johns started. And you could start to see getting on the Texas Rangers in the dugout, which was along the third base side. And obviously bullpens behind the outfield fence, bleachers. Those guys are already tanked up, and Cleveland fans have been known to take their alcoholics seriously. So then, as we're kind of sitting in, and I was sitting with my best friend at the evening, he had his girlfriend with him, and we were sitting somewhere between first base and the right field foul pole. And we were up a little bit so that we could actually see what was going on. And the first indication to me that I picked up that this was going to go nuts this week or that night was the fact that a lady hops out of her seat, gets onto the field because the netting at that time only covered behind home plate, hops onto the field. Now, I didn't see this because basically her back was towards us. She flashes the crowd and then runs up to the home plate umpire wanting to be, I guess, Morgana, have to go out and lay a big smooch on the home field umpire. And then you kind of knew.
Umpires need loving too, Dave.
What?
Umpires need loving too.
Yes, they did. And it just got progressively worse as it goes on. Then, not to be outdone, I saw another fan hop out of the left field foul line area and try to go around and slap, give me five stuff to the three Cleveland outfielders. And I think Oscar Gamble was one. George Hendricks was the second one. And I'm not sure who the third one was right now.
So sitting on the first baseline, were you part of the group that was throwing hot dogs or an empty bottle of Thunderbird at Mike Hargrove?
No, I have to admit I was not doing that. I do feel kind of ironic it was that Hargrove and I believe Toby Hara also played for the Texas Rangers at that time. We'll both do. We'll play. We'll be with the Cleveland Indians. We'll play for the Tribe. So,
do you remember what kind of pushed the fan base to storm the concession stand or go attack the beer truck?
Well, really, it was because they couldn't really serve people fast enough. If you get this one, the concessions inside the stadium couldn't serve it fast enough. So they set up two beer trucks at the outside of the stadium. They had, if I remember this correctly, two girls that may have been of age not to be able to do that, to serve it, but they really even then couldn't serve the beer fast enough. And once they got going in here, now you got your beer, let's go back into the stadium and join it. And as we often know, it usually only takes about 2 or 3 knuckleheads to get the base started. And sure enough, it did.
Seth, do you have any metrics around this, any statistics around this historic event that we can kind of tie it back to the chaos that Dave was explaining?
So there's 25,000 people that showed up. Cleveland, the old stadium, Municipal Stadium, was built for the 32 Olympics, which they didn't get, but they tried to attract the 32 Olympics there. So this was a huge baseball stadium, could seat well over 100,000. 25,000 in the 70s was a huge crowd for the Indians. And if you kind of put this in context today, even today, a normal beer at the stadium back then in the 70s was 60 cents, 65 cents, if I remember right, and 10 cents. Using today's cost, folks, this would be equivalent to a beer costing 64 cents today. So you think about like what we're able to do. Now, it was Stroh's 3-2 beer. For those of you who are up north who are familiar with Stroh's and 3-2 beer, they always say, well, it's not like real beer. It's there. But when you're able to take 6 at a time, and that's what you're able to do. You could go up and get 6 beers at a time. I think current limitation fresh is 2.
I think 2 per person, yeah.
Right.
Of age, yes.
Right. So, yeah, that's the fun statistics I have right there, just to give everyone kind of an idea on how many people are there and how much it was costing people.
Well, hey, Seth, I got another one for you. I had a factory job at the time. I was making probably $3 an hour. Going back that far, and you realize, okay, if I took home $3, let's put it this way. All right, I got 30 beers right there for just 1 hour's of work.
Right. And the crazy thing, Fresh, too, that people don't realize that this isn't the last time Cleveland hosts 10-cent beer night. They wind up doing it just a little over a month later, July 18th, and they attract almost 40,000 fans, 42,000 fans, but they limited 2 cups.
Did they bring the National Guard in for protection as well?
No. This was great because I was there that night too. It was. We just couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. So we went again for that one. And that time, instead of having like 25 additional security people, basically, as you came down the ramp to go to your seat, there was an officer at every exit ramp or where you go in to get to your seats, standing there at the entrance, watching the people come in and out, in and out. And
just ready to put them in the paddy wagon?
I have no idea what they had on the outside, but I was just amazed to see 45. At the time, I remembered it as being 55,000. And that made the stadium feel like it was packed.
Right.
And oh my gosh, it was surprise. Okay, there's an officer in blue there, and you just saw them all over the place because they weren't putting up with any more nonsense.
What was the moment you realized that went from tomfoolery and just, college kids having cheap drinks to, hey, this might be starting to get a little bit real?
Well, the first thing, like I say, is the funny one that I thought of was, or I think this one took place around the 6th inning or so. We had at that point in time, we called them streakers, and that was one of the vogue things to do. And we had a streaker break out, ran, and I remember him I first picked him up from going from second base into the center field. And when he got there, you could see the officers of the law hop over the walls just to go run him down. He takes out to the center field or right center field fence, which was 8 feet at that point in time. Since we were sitting up a little bit elevated, we got a better view of it. As he gets to the fence, he's got one arm wrapped up with his clothes. He takes his clothes, throws it over the fence, and they just kind of fan out on the other side. But what the poor gentleman could not see was that there was an officer of the law waiting for him on the other side. And we go, well, I hope you like your cell buddies for the evening. And after then, it was just about every inning or so, people were coming out and running onto the field. And that's where I would say by the end of the 8th inning, you started wondering, how nuts is this going to be? And how safe are you really going to be there at the stadium that night?
Right.
So people were throwing
surprised they made the 8th inning. Right.
And people were throwing fireworks out. And it was noted that, they used to a lot of times have M80s, if you remember those things. They'd throw those things out onto the field, and those things were going off. And yet you kind of start wondering, wouldn't it be kind of smart that you call the game or postpone the game for temporary delay the game, clear out everybody out of the stadium, and then continue on. But once again, they were looking for their pound of flesh of revenge for what went on the week before.
Yeah. And people don't realize Cleveland was down 5-1 in that game and tied it in the eighth, if I remember right, eighth or ninth. And it was 5-5 going into the ninth.
Mm-hmm. Actually, they tied it. I want to say they tied. I'm pretty sure they tied it up in the ninth inning, and actually had the. I think it was John Lowenstein, if I remember correctly, was on second base with actually a chance to that the Indians would have a chance to actually hit in the winning run, and then it just got too nuts. I mean, people were coming out onto the field. You could see they started going after the Rangers players. And the next thing you know, Billy Martin, who was the manager of the Rangers at that time, he says, well, we're not going to put up with this. And you know how feisty Billy Martin was. And he led the team out there, and they got bats in their hands. And we're going, this is kind of not good. And I will give credit for the Indian players, too. What they actually did is they ran out onto the field, too, to help protect their fellow Major League ball players. And you knew this was not a good scene anymore. And about that point in time, we left. And
now, Dave,
go ahead.
Should footage of this melee been included in Major League during the final scene?
I think it would have been great. I would have loved to have heard what they would have done. Bob Uecker would have. Yeah, Harry Doyle, Bob Uecker would have done with this thing, because that guy came up with so many hysterical lines. It would have been hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
I think that would have been pure, or maybe like the very beginning, a pure gold just to lead in after they show the city. That would have been just amazing.
Absolutely. Right. But it's one of those things, like I say, I've been fortunate to see things like a no-hitter down at the old Municipal Stadium. Whatnot. I got a chance to see Earl Weaver going through his things and get kicked out of the game, people climbing foul poles and all this thing. So I saw some quite interesting few things there during my time there in Cleveland, going to the old Municipal Stadium. So, but this one really does take the cake.
Now, last question I have.
Sure.
I know you might be biased because you're from Cleveland, you're at the game, but what was more egregious or monumental, this or Disco Demolition Night in Chicago?
Oh, geez, because I believe Disco Demolition came afterwards.
It did.
And it did. And I'm going, why?
5 years.
Why? You know, it's like this is, at that point in time, you go, you mean somebody couldn't see this coming? Right. Somebody could not. And it almost got as bad as, like, in Progressive Shield, they actually had a Jimmy Buffett concert on the playing field. And they could figure out, you don't think people are going to rip this whole place up? It happened. Right. And like I say, I think this one is more egregious just because people came out, players had bats in their hands, people came out throwing chairs. There was one person actually caught with a knife in their hand, a knife on their person. That was, like I said, that was the point. It says, the morning afterwards, it says, I think we made the right choice leaving when we did.
Right.
Hey, they didn't light the lake on fire, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, the Cuyahoga River could have easily gone on fire too.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, it's great to go down memory lane for 10-cent beer night 50 years later. And the fact that we get to share this story with our listening audience as we kind of enter into the slow season during sports. So
as you think about Fresh, you're referring to things in history, I will say this was a night of infamy here at Municipal Stadium.
Yeah.
Yep.
They definitely fought on the bleachers and the bleachers.
Yes, it did. So,
absolutely. All right. Well, we want to thank my dad, Dave, for joining us tonight. It was fun to go down this memory lane here, folks. You've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. Hey, before you head out of here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, get notified every single time we drop a new episode, because you guys know we're getting closer and closer to college football season. So Fresh and I will start working on all of those episodes. Can't wait for that. And make sure you're checking out spinnablesports.com. Yes, that is spinnablesports.com. What did you know about 10 Cent Beer Night? Leave it in the comment section below. Follow us on the social medias. Interact with us. Do all those things. Fresh, you got anything else before we close out for tonight?
Well, I'll say if you did enjoy this legendary conversation, also check out our conversation with the great Dominic Wilkins. We did an amazing job with him. Really, really cool.
Very good.
Hit up YouTube's Spinnable Sports YouTube. Hit up the website. Enjoy, interact. We love to hear it all, but we got tons of great content for you. The amazing Dave and Dominic Wilkins back to back, and you can't get much better than that.
Absolutely. His battles with Bird were legendary. So, but thank you very much for having me around. I appreciate it all, and love your guys' show. As I always said, 2 5-stars with a microphone.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, everyone, bye, y'all.
Bye, ya. Peace out.